Our next speaker has a long history in the cause of sustainable development, and in particular the cause of climate change. She's redefining the role of First Lady with her passion, energy, and leadership. This past February, she spoke at our Mayor's Climate Summit, and I have to tell you, it was kind of crazy. She read off a long list of sustainability initiatives, and people kind of went berserk. They were cheering, and I think some people were crying. Our long winter was over. Someone in the crowd yelled out, "Tammy, you're a rock star." It was like that. Bonnie Watson Coleman recently described Tammy Murphy as a mashup of Hillary Clinton, Jackie Kennedy, and Michelle Obama. When I first met her, I asked her what's the proper way to address the First Lady, and she said, "Just Tammy." Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the First Lady of the state of New Jersey, Tammy Murphy.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm delighted to join you for the 2018 Sustainability Summit. To Randy Solomon, Randy down there, Director of the Sustainability Institute at TCNJ and Sustainable New Jersey, thank you for the introduction. More importantly, thank you for your leadership as we work to create a more sustainable and stronger New Jersey. To my friend and fellow speaker, BPU President Joe Fiordaliso, it's always an honor to share the stage with you, and as it is to share it with all of the panelists who will participate in the summit throughout the day. And it's always a pleasure for me to be with a group so committed to protecting our environment, the health of our residents, and the quality of life throughout our communities. So I applaud Sustainable New Jersey for bringing together such a diverse array of partners from the public, private, and local sectors to support our communities in adopting more sustainable practices that will empower our collective future. With your help, we're already turning the page and writing a new chapter in our state's history with a new administration and a new governor who truly understands the challenges of climate change and who puts our environment back at the top of our state's list of priorities where it clearly belongs. When it comes to climate change, we all know that New Jersey stands as one of the states most at risk. A new study put this in stark relief. If we do nothing, by mid-century, up to 62,000 New Jersey households may find their homes in areas threatened by chronic flooding, and by the end of the century, that number could jump fourfold. That's our warning call. But we don't need to wait another 30 years. We're already sensing the clues of the threat of climate change. Hurricane Sandy, strong nor'easters, greater swings in weather patterns. After all, it was in March, not January or February, when we experienced the worst of this past winter with 3 successive nor'easters. But as you recall, just a few days later, the skies were sunny, temperatures had climbed to nearly 60 degrees, and the snow had completely melted. The human activities that cause climate change will only intensify our changing weather over time and increase our urgency to act. Our oceans will grow warmer, our sea levels will rise higher, and the impact of natural disasters like Superstorm Sandy will grow in number and in force. This is where we see the connection between climate change and our economy. Think of the Jersey Shore families I just mentioned. They are just a handful of the millions of people who make the shore one of our strongest economic engines, accounting for more than $44 billion in annual economic activity. So yes, our failure will cost us in every sense. The reality of climate change also gives greater urgency to alternative methods of commuting, which would take tons of CO2 out of our air. And of course, we know climate change also has serious implications for the health of our residents. Higher temperatures increase the vulnerability of certain populations, especially the elderly, sick, and low income. A report from the Natural Resources Defense Council found that in New Jersey, more than 950 emergency room visits and nearly 150 hospitalizations every year are related to heat exposure. The state continues to produce elevated levels of ground-level ozone that contribute to smog and respiratory problems. In Newark, for example, 1 in 4 children have asthma, a direct result of the city's poor air quality. We cannot ignore the needs of environmental justice communities. As a charter member of the Climate Reality Project, alongside former Vice President Al Gore, these are concerns upon which I have spent considerable time and focus, and I know you have as well. We already know that President Trump and his administration take a very dim view of the environment and are even more dismissive of science. That was on full display in his January announcement that the entire Atlantic seaboard would be opened for fossil fuel exploration. This goes far beyond politics. Democrats and Republicans alike have recognized that drilling anywhere in the Atlantic is a threat to our coastal communities. Our oceans and the pollutants that get into the ocean water don't care about state lines. What happens off the coast of Virginia, the Carolinas, or even Florida would impact us just as much as if it happens off of our own coastline. For New Jersey, opening the Atlantic Ocean for offshore drilling would cause catastrophic and lasting harm to our beautiful 130-mile shoreline, and it would be an economic disaster to our tourism industry. It also would put New Jersey beaches, fisheries, and marine life along the coast at great environmental risk, impacting our state's billion-dollar commercial and recreational fishing industry as well. That's why I was so proud to watch Phil sign into law not only a ban on offshore drilling in state waters, but also a prohibition on permitting for the construction of any infrastructure that would make drilling further offshore possible. But what is so outrageous is the Trump administration's latest ploy to extort states into accepting offshore fossil fuel drilling through the Enhancing State Management of Federal Lands and Water Act. What a misnomer of a name that has. This act would make states pay their way out of allowing fossil fuel exploration off of their coastlines, a cost many times more than the value of the leases the federal government would seek. Phil and a coalition of governors from Connecticut, North Carolina, Rhode Island, and Virginia are fighting this attempt to undermine our coastline, our environment, and indeed our way of life. This is not a time for us to go back to 19th and 20th century forms of energy. This is a time for innovation. This is a time for investing in offshore wind energy, solar energy, electric vehicles, and other new and exciting technologies that can not just change our world, but how it runs. We know New Jersey has an enviable location that most every other state would like to have. Our position in the middle of the Atlantic coast and the powerful winds that come with it make our state an ideal place to grow the offshore wind industry. Early on, my husband made his vision for New Jersey's energy future very clear. To combat climate change along the shore, we must bring online more diversified sources of energy that are reliable yet also sustainable. That's why Phil signed an executive order in January requiring the State Department of Environmental Protection and the Board of Public Utilities to finally and fully implement the 2010 Offshore Wind Economic Development Act. After nearly a decade, the promise of offshore wind finally has real momentum here in New Jersey. Last month, I was so pleased to be on hand for the opening of Ørsted's official New Jersey office in Atlantic City, just miles from where Ørsted proposes to build a wind farm capable of powering up to 600,000 homes and businesses. Climate change is a reality that we now are living with. Understanding these real threats to our state was among the first policy changes made by Phil, including signing an executive order to begin New Jersey's re-entry into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, adding adding New Jersey to the U.S. Climate Alliance by committing to live up to the goals of the Paris Accord, and joining with our neighboring states to support a permanent ban on fracking within the Delaware River watershed. I just have to say, I hope my husband can hear all this clapping over there in Trenton. In addition, New Jersey has withdrawn from a multi-state lawsuit opposing the Clean Power Plan, a policy developed by the Obama administration to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by roughly 1/3 by 2030. I'm also pleased Phil has directed the Department of Environmental Protection, with support from other state agencies, to develop guidance on how all state departments can incorporate environmental justice considerations into their actions. This is especially critical for our low-income communities and communities of color in New Jersey, who, as I mentioned earlier, so often bear the brunt of pollution and the impacts of climate change. And Joe and his team have already begun the effort to create an entirely new energy master plan for New Jersey, one that will point the way to a 100% clean energy state by the year 2050. Yay, Joe. So as you can see, we are now at the cusp of this revolution. We are standing up again for our values. We know that New Jersey's future rests in our ability to both do good and do well. Phil and I both reject, as I know you all do, the false rhetoric that we can either have clean air and water or a job, but not both. And I believe we will get there. Together with countless New Jerseyans who similarly reject this antiquated and divisive thinking, we have begun turning the rhetoric on its head. And in doing so, we are working to reclaim our state's position as a national leader. That's why your work in creating more sustainable communities throughout New Jersey is so very critical. We now have a government which recognizes that a clean environment is vital to our future and to our economic growth. We now have a government which believes that strong environmental stewardship supports all 9 million residents who call this state home, who rely on clean water and clean air, and who want a sustainable future. We've made a great start, but we know we can and must do more and do better. And working together with all of you, we will. We know we can do this. Innovation and leadership, after all, are in our DNA. Thank you for all the work you do and will continue to do on behalf of our great state. I now have the great privilege of introducing your next speaker. Okay. Joe Fiordaliso is no stranger to the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. He has served as commissioner on the BPU since 2005, when he was nominated by Governor Richard Cody and confirmed by the Senate. On January 16th of this year, my husband appointed Joe to serve as president of the BPU. As president, he serves in a number of capacities, including the National Association of Regulatory Commissioners Committee on Critical Infrastructure and Committee on Energy Resources and the Environment. He is a member and investment chair of the Mid-Atlantic Conference of Regulatory Utilities Commissioners. He is a member of the National Council on Electricity Policy. He is on the board of directors of the Organization of PJM States, and he is also a member of the Advisory Council to the Board of Directors of the Electric Power Research Institute. Lots of acronyms for the many hats he wears and the roles he has. The bottom line is he really knows his stuff. More importantly, he is our go-to man on offshore wind energy, clean energy, and the Energy Master Plan. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Fiordaliso.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you for making me sound so good. Aren't we great and fortunate to have such a First Lady? She's proven to be a strong environmental ally, and the vision of Governor Murphy, and with her right alongside doing the yeoman's task, we are going to reach a future in 2050 of 100% clean energy generation in the state of New Jersey. We have worked with Sustainable Jersey for a long time. I guess we were a charter member, weren't we? And to this day, we are honored to help fund many of the programs that Sustainable New Jersey is involved in. And one of the most important things I believe that Sustainable New Jersey does is its interaction with municipalities. Bringing really what we're trying to achieve on the state level into the local level. Because this goal is not one that comes from the top down. It has to come as a collaborative effort between all of us. I drive around and I see solar on municipal rooftops. We have 13 municipalities today that are installing or in the process of installing microgrids, so that when another Sandy hits, notice I said when another Sandy hits, not if, when another Sandy hits, vital services will still be available to our municipalities and the citizens who live there. And just one thing, personal thing, if I may interject. As a former elected official, those local assets that we have, our police, our fire, our hospitals, have to keep working. Right after Sandy hit, my town was basically out of power. There was one little section somehow that had power. One gas station and a Dunkin' Donuts. The Dunkin' Donuts, to me, was the most important thing. So like everybody else, I went to that one Dunkin' Donuts that was available and still had power. And I got into line. 45 minutes later, I got to the counter, and I was told, we just ran out of cups. I don't want anybody in the future to run out of cups or miss their Dunkin' Donuts coffee. We need to ensure the fact that we have an infrastructure and we have the tools to continue to supply our citizens with what they need. Because as the First Lady said, these storms today, or the storms that we've experienced, are not storm of the century, or once every 100 years, or a 500-year storm. They're becoming yearly storms. Who would have expected in the month of March we would have had 3 devastating nor'easters that caused more power outages than we've had since Sandy? We work with the local municipalities to get that solar on your rooftops. Sustainable Jersey works with you and is a conduit. We have our ESIP program, which is a program that provides, I believe, so much help to all of our municipalities, and I wonder sometimes why every municipality doesn't take advantage of it. We have so many programs that we promote, that Sustainable Jersey promotes, to make things better. And I know I'm talking to the choir here. I'm preaching to the people who know. But it's extremely important that we never forget when we have an opportunity to go out and spread the word, so to speak, that we spread the word. It's very difficult to believe that there are still people who are naysayers regarding climate change. That, well, this is not going to happen. The First Lady mentioned a few things that might happen by the end of this century. We say, well, that's a long time ago. Well, that's only a little over 80 years from now. I'm not going to be around, I don't think. If I can, I'm going to try to be. As someone very nicely pointed out to me the other day, Joe, your runway's getting shorter. I don't know if that was a compliment. I'm still trying to figure that one out. But we all have, or most of us, know young people, have young people as relatives, have young people that we care about who might face the devastating effects of climate change. And I say this in every speech I give, and if you've heard it before, I'm not going to say forgive me because it's worth repeating. And it's something you have to repeat every time you go out and talk. Every time you go out and say, climate change is real. We have, and this is, if I may suggest, what I continue to say and will continue to say as long as I can continue to talk. We have a moral obligation, not just a mere obligation. We have a moral obligation to those children that we care about, whether they're our own or they're somebody else's. We have a moral obligation to them that we have done everything conceivable, everything humanly possible to minimize the effects of climate change. As was mentioned by the First Lady, the Board of Public Utilities is the lead agency in our offshore wind initiative. We have become an international, and I say this with humility, and I say it with the sincere hope that we can achieve it, the international go-to entity for offshore wind because of our aggressive goals laid out by Governor Murphy. We will have 3,500 megawatts of offshore wind by 2030. We will continue to increase our solar industry, an industry that we grew from infancy. And I've been on the board long enough to know those early days of solar. When we went to the SREC program and the abuse we took for going to the SREC program, because there were naysayers say, well, it will never work. I think it's worked. We have over 90,000 installed solar installations in the state of New Jersey, many of which are on your municipal buildings. Back in the early 2000s, just as a frame of reference, we had 6. New Jersey has a great story to tell. We don't tell it frequently enough. But that's up to all of us, as I said before, because we are the ones who have to go out there. We are the ones who have to preach the word. We are the ones who have to say, listen, back in the early 2000s, they told us solar was too expensive to build. What's happened to the cost? It's come down. They're using the same argument as far as offshore wind is concerned. Well, we've let our European neighbors make a lot of mistakes, and we've learned from those mistakes. We will continue to learn from those mistakes, and we're seeing the cost of offshore wind starting to come down. So when people give the argument that all of this costs money, the answer is yes, it does. Do we have an alternative? Is climate change real? I think most of us here, if not all of us, submit the fact that it is. Then the bottom line is we don't have an alternative. We have to continue to move in that direction, a direction that's going to make us sustainable, a direction that's going to reduce our reliance and eventually eliminate our reliance on fossil fuel. Our job collectively, from the municipalities to the state to the federal government, and I'm not sure how much help we're going to get from them, but it's a collaborative effort. We have to do what has to be done. And in the meantime, as you well know, we have to also enhance our infrastructure. We'll never eliminate power outages, but hopefully we can reduce the frequency of them. Hopefully we can reduce the duration of those power outages. Does that cost money? Yes. See, I'm a romantic at heart. I always thought it was love that made the world go round. It's obviously money. But do we have an alternative? Those people, the people we serve, want to be able to go and get their Dunkin' Donuts coffee. And those young people who we're just renting this earth from, because they will be the occupants of it for a long time. And I borrowed that from a Native American saying. Have to have an earth and a world to live in. And just think about those children, your nieces, your nephews, your grandchildren. And just think that we have a moral obligation to ensure the fact that when we put our head on the pillow at night, we can say that we did everything possible, everything humanly possible, to make the world better and more sustainable. So I look forward to the collaboration with Sustainable Jersey. I look forward to working or continuing to work with various organizations, and particularly with our municipalities. Because together, New Jersey will be the greenest state in the Union by 2050. I thank you.
Thank you, President Fiordaliso. For those of you who have gotten certified and been to the Sustainable Jersey luncheon at the League of Municipalities, we always invite someone from the DEP and the BPU to speak to reaffirm the partnership. They were more than just charter members, but sort of instrumental in the founding of Sustainable Jersey. And like a graduation, it's like partially really exciting and partially really boring. And we're open to your suggestions for how to make it more, scintillating. And so we always invite the BPU. Some years we get the president, some years we get a senior staff person, some years we get a commissioner. A couple of times we've been lucky enough to get to Joe when he was a commissioner, and very lucky. He's a great speaker. So I want to thank him and the board.